They laughed when she walked in just another quiet black girl at a southern prep school. They called her names, trashed her locker, pushed her to break. But what they didn't know, she was trained for war. And when they cornered her, they didn't get a victim. They awakened a storm. What happened in the parking lot changed the school forever. And by the end, even her worst enemy came back to say sorry. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. Under the warm haze of a Charleston sunrise, the sleek black sedan came to a stop in front of Savannah High School, a place where the past dripped from every brick like humidity off the southern air. A new semester had begun, and with it an unfamiliar face stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder, sneakers touching the concrete like she was entering enemy territory. Her name was Amina Clark, 16, silent, and dangerous in ways nobody here could possibly imagine. To the casual observer, she was just another transfer student, just another girl trying to blend into the tapestry of privilege and tradition that defined this wealthy southern school. But the story written on Amina's skin, in the way her eyes tracked every detail, in the precise way she moved, like she was always calculating space and angles, told a deeper story. One forged not from textbooks and cheer squads, but from disciplined pain and the art of never backing down. Charleston was nothing like Oakland. In Oakland, she was known, feared even, not because she was loud or brash, but because when the time came to defend herself or someone else, she didn't hesitate. She didn't boast. She was executed. 9 years of Shotokan karate had taught her silence was stronger than noise and precision, far more devastating than brute force. Here, though, no one knew. No one suspected that the quiet black girl with the piercing stare could break a grown man's wrist in less than a second. The moment she stepped through the school gates, the whispers started. The diversity edition, someone said under their breath. Scholarship, probably another chuckled. They didn't even hide it. The stares weren't curious. They were surgical, dissecting her presence, searching for a reason to dismiss her. She kept walking. That was the rule. Never let them know you feel it. The racism, the judgment, the weight of walking into a room where your presence is an inconvenience. Her mother had taught her long ago, you don't need to shrink for them, Amina. You just need to stand. She stood all right, head high, gaze steady, as she passed the sea of khaki skirts, blazers, and carefully curated smiles. Her homeroom teacher glanced up, then back at the attendance sheet, didn't smile, didn't speak, just marked her as present. It was a small moment, but it landed like a slap. By lunchtime, the whispers had evolved into tactics. Haley Prescott, the self-declared queen of the school, and daughter of Charleston's district attorney, sauntered over to Amina's lunch table with the elegance of a lion circling prey. Her entourage trailed her like perfume. Amina was eating alone again by choice. So Haley drawled, placing both palms on the table like she was staking a claim, you're the new girl. California, right? Amina looked up calm. Yeah, cute accent. Haley smirked. So what brought you all the way to Charleston Witness Protection? A few of the girls behind her giggled. Amina didn't blink. Military transfer, she said. My mom's stationed at the joint base. Oh, Haley said, voice syrupy. A tough girl. I like that. But listen, you might want to tone it down a bit. This school doesn't really do urban drama. It wasn't the words, it was the delivery. The way she emphasized urban like it was a disease. Amina didn't reply. She just stood up slowly, and the subtle scrape of her chair echoed too loudly in the quiet cafeteria. The girls behind Haley flinched, not sure why. Amina didn't make a scene. She just picked up her tray and walked away, as if the queen herself were invisible. That moment sealed her fate. By the end of the day, her locker had been decorated with a crude drawing of a monkey and the word thug scrawled in red Sharpie. She found her gym shoes in the toilet, and when she told a teacher, the woman looked at her with polite indifference and said, "We don't tolerate false accusations here. Maybe try getting along with your classmates." Later that night, in a small guest house on the edge of the base, Amina sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor. A single candle flickered beside her casting shadows across the framed photo of her late father, a Marine who taught her how to punch before he taught her how to read. She opened her journal and began to write her script tight and controlled day one. They saw a target. I gave them silence. But silence is not surrender. Downstairs, the news hummed on quietly as her mother stitched another military patch onto her uniform. Amina exhaled, slowly, purposefully. Then she stood and walked to the corner of the room where her heavy training mat was rolled up like a secret weapon. She unrolled it with reverence. Her hands moved with ritual, stance, breath, focus. Each punch sliced through the air with mechanical grace. Not fury discipline. Her knuckles knew every strike. Her body remembered every bruise. She trained for peace, but was never unprepared for war. And the war had just begun. Unbeknownst to Haley, to the entire school, to the teachers who dismissed her, Charleston wasn't the first place that tried to break her spirit. But it might be the last that dared underestimate her. Because the storm had arrived, and it wasn't loud, it was waiting. By the second week, the tension at Savannah High had evolved from whispers and stares to something sharper, something with edges. Amina Clark moved through the school like a shadow, silent, observant, precise, but shadows, no matter how quiet, still cast light in certain corners. And in those corners, the resentment was growing. It wasn't just about her being new anymore. It was about the fact that she didn't flinch, that she didn't cower or conform. And in a place built on hierarchy and legacy, a girl like Amina Black, quiet, composed, was a threat not because she was loud, but because she refused to be small. Haley Prescott noticed it first. Every time Amina walked by, the room shifted. Conversations paused. Some students looked uncomfortable, others intrigued. There was something disarming about the way Amina carried herself, and for someone like Haley used to dictating who mattered and who didn't, it was maddening. "She's got an attitude," Haley said one afternoon in the locker room, tossing her gold ponytail over one shoulder. "Have you seen the way she looks at people, like she's above all this?" Claire, one of her closest friends, shrugged. "Maybe she's just shy." "No," Haley snapped. "She's arrogant. She thinks she's too good for this school. Trust me, I know her type." Haley did what people like her had always done to girls who didn't play by the rules. She escalated. Subtly at first, tampering with Amina's locker combination, spilling water accidentally on her seat in English class, whispering just loudly enough for Amina to hear Charity Case Project Kid military brat. The attacks weren't random. They were strategic slicing in places meant to unravel her slowly. But Amina didn't bite. She kept her head down, her eyes forward. She focused on her work. Her grades within 2 weeks were already rising to the top of each class. Teachers who had first glanced over her now stopped her in the hall to praise her essays. That only fueled Haley's anger. "You're letting her win," she hissed at her group one afternoon. "She thinks she's untouchable, like she's better than all of us. If we don't remind her who runs this place, we'll all be invisible." So they took it further. It started with a rumor, small, poisonous, effective, that Amina had a criminal record, that she'd transferred because she'd assaulted someone at her old school, that she was dangerous, the kind of girl who'd snap and hurt someone. The rumor made its way from the tennis team to the debate club, all the way to the administration. The faculty never acknowledged it aloud, but Amina noticed the shift. The extra eyes, the subtle distance, the weight of suspicion. The first real breaking point came in the girls' locker room after gym. Amina had just finished changing when Haley and her entourage cornered her, blocking the exit with casual malice. There were no teachers, no cameras, just the scent of sweat and body spray, and the unspoken knowledge that whatever happened here wouldn't be believed if told later. "You don't belong here," Haley said flatly. "No one wants you here." Amina met her eyes, calm as always. "Then why are you so obsessed with me?" Haley's face flushed, but her voice stayed even. "You walk around like you're better than us, like this school owes you something." "I walk around like I belong," Amina said. "Maybe that bothers you." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even said with edge. But it hit harder than anything else could have. And for Haley, humiliation was the one currency she refused to spend. She lunged, not with a punch, but with an open palm meant to slap Amina's dignity away in front of the others. Amina moved before the hand could connect, not violently, not even defensively. She simply sidestepped, turned her body just enough to avoid the blow. Haley stumbled forward, caught herself, and turned around, red-faced and breathless. The other girls froze. Amina stood still, her expression unreadable. "You don't want to do this," she said quietly. The silence stretched too long. And in that space, Haley realized something she couldn't articulate, but could absolutely feel: this girl wasn't afraid of her. Worse, this girl had the kind of control that made everyone else look chaotic. "You think you scared me," Haley spat, trying to recover face. "You're nothing here." But her voice was thinner now. It cracked. And though she tried to hide it, everyone could hear it. Later that day, Amina was called into the guidance counselor's office, not because she had done anything wrong, but because a concerned student had reported that she might be emotionally unstable. It was dressed up as a wellness check. But Amina saw it for what it was, a warning. "You know, if you're struggling," the counselor said gently, "there are resources." "I'm not struggling," Amina replied, "but I notice none of you ever ask why the same girls keep targeting me." The counselor offered a tight-lipped smile. "Sometimes it's best to just keep your head down. You don't want to create waves." Amina left the office feeling a familiar heat in her chest, the heat of injustice, of knowing you're being watched, not for what you've done, but for who you are. That night, she didn't write in her journal. She didn't train. She sat in silence, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slow and deliberate above her. She had followed the rules. She had given them every benefit of the doubt. And it still wasn't enough. Something had to change. She wasn't going to be the girl who got swallowed whole by their cruelty. She was going to be the girl who made them remember her name. The parking lot behind Savannah High stretched long and empty in the dying light of a Friday afternoon. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the world in copper and gold, but there was nothing soft about the tension that hung in the air. Whispers had circulated all day. A rumor, no, an invitation, had made its way from one hallway to the next. Amina Clark was being called out. It wasn't a secret anymore. Not after the locker room incident. Not after the rumors intensified and the stories grew more sinister. The narrative had been twisted so well that even teachers began to look at Amina like a ticking bomb. One wrong word, one sharp look, and she would be labeled permanently. So now, with the school day over, a small crowd had gathered in the lot behind the gym where the security cameras didn't reach. A stage of sorts had been built by years of similar confrontations, mostly boys posturing over petty drama. But today was different. Today was a trap. Haley Prescott was already there, standing with her usual crew arms crossed like royalty watching a peasant trial. At her side, Troy Maddox, 6'2" star linebacker, and her boyfriend paced like a pit bull waiting for permission to lunge. It was clear who the bait was and who was meant to play executioner. Amina arrived alone. She knew what this was. She knew the setup. But walking away from it wouldn't have stopped anything. They'd only find another way to humiliate her. This time, she decided they'd get something else. She didn't wear anything special, just jean sneakers and her usual calm. But she moved like someone who had calculated every angle. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the silence of her bedroom, in the privacy of a training mat, long before these kids ever noticed her. Troy stepped forward, first smirking. Finally, he said, arms spread. "We were starting to think you'd chicken out." Amina didn't blink. "You sure you want this, Troy?" That sentence landed differently than she intended. It wasn't arrogance. It was concern. A genuine one. But in a crowd that demanded spectacle, kindness was seen as mockery. Troy's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm afraid of you?" he sneered. "Little girl from Cali thinks she's tough." Haley stepped in, then voice laced with venom. "We just want a little show, Amina. That's what you want, right? To prove you're not scared? Or is all that strong, silent type just an act?" Amina scanned the faces around her. Some were here for drama. Some for proof that the rumors were true. And a few, just a few, were hoping they were about to witness something different. "I'm not here to fight," she said, "but I won't be pushed." Troy laughed. "Then walk away." And when she turned, deciding exactly to do that, he grabbed her shoulder. It was instinct, pure silent reflex. Amina pivoted on her back foot, her body fluid and explosive all at once. She didn't strike to hurt, only to redirect. His hand was off her shoulder. In a second, his arm twisted midair, and before he understood what had happened, he was on the ground. Not hard, not injured, just there, looking up at her. The crowd went dead silent. Someone's phone was already recording. Amina stepped back, breathing even. Her stance wasn't aggressive, it was balanced, controlled, a storm held in stillness. Troy stood slowly, pride more bruised than anything else. His face reddened, but he didn't make a move to charge again. Because he had felt it. The power in her restraint, the strength in her silence. Haley was speechless, her perfect world tilting in real time. The script she had written had flipped. and she wasn't ready for this version of the story. But Amina didn't wait for anyone to catch up. She turned, walked to the edge of the parking lot, and disappeared into the street before a word could be spoken. That night, the video hit social media, a blurry 10-second clip of a girl defending herself with elegant precision. There were no punches thrown, no blood, no violence, just skill, just truth. Within hours, the comments poured in. Who is she? Did you see how calm she was? She didn't even want to fight. This is power. By Monday, the entire school had seen it. So had the faculty. So had parents. The next day, Amina was pulled into the principal's office. The mood wasn't welcoming. This incident, it's causing disruption, Principal Albright said, frowning, as if Amina had brought scandal upon the school. I was defending myself, she replied. He touched me. That's not what some of the other students are saying. There are concerns about your temperament. Amina didn't flinch. You've seen the video. Yes. Well, I didn't hurt him. I didn't escalate. I didn't throw the first word or the first hand. The principal hesitated. There was something in her tone, measured, unwavering, that left little room for distortion. You'll be placed on temporary suspension until we can review everything thoroughly. Amina nodded once. She didn't argue, because the truth had already begun to bloom beyond the walls of that room. That evening, when her mother arrived home, Amina was already packing a small bag. They suspended you, her mother asked, jaw tight. They said it's temporary. Her mother stood still for a long moment before walking to her closet. Minutes later, she emerged in full uniform combat boots, medals, shining stripes prominent. You're not walking into that hearing alone, she said. Let them see who raised you. And 3 days later, at the district hearing, Sergeant Clark entered beside her daughter, her presence radiating authority and pride. She didn't need to say much. Just her standing there, unapologetic and firm, was enough to rewrite the narrative. They watched the video again. The board asked questions. They probed, but it was clear the one person who had tried to de-escalate, who had shown control in the face of provocation, was the one being punished. Amina was cleared. But the moment was bigger than reinstatement. It was the moment they stopped seeing her as a problem and started seeing her for what she truly was, a force they hadn't prepared for, a story they didn't know how to end, a girl who chose her battles, then won them with grace. By the time Amina Clark returned to Savannah High, something had shifted. The air felt different. The glances she once received, laced with suspicion, ridicule, or quiet malice, were now replaced by something else: caution, curiosity, and in a few cases, admiration. She hadn't just returned from a suspension. She had returned from a public reckoning, and she came back standing taller than when she left. The halls buzzed with unspoken change. The silence that had once protected Amina now amplified her presence. And though she never asked for attention, it followed her. Not because she craved it, but because people had seen something undeniable: courage paired with discipline, dignity in the face of discrimination. But what happened in the parking lot wasn't just a turning point for her. It was a mirror for the entire school. In classrooms, students began to speak more openly. Some of the quiet kids, the ones who often sat in the back, unseen and unheard, started raising their hands. In the cafeteria, new tables formed not according to social hierarchy, but by shared interests. The old system, where Haley Prescott ruled through passive-aggressive dominance, began to fray, and Haley could feel it. She watched the slow unraveling from a distance. She tried at first to spin the story label Amina as aggressive, unpredictable a threat. But the video said otherwise. And worse for Haley, the school had begun to notice how she had always been at the center of every rumor, every exclusion, every cruel laugh. Even the girls who once stood behind her began to step back. That's when the principal called Amina in, not to scold, but to ask for help. Amina Principal Albright said, his tone now noticeably more respectful. "We're reviewing our Student Leadership Council structure, and there's been a recommendation that you be considered to lead the Diversity and Inclusion Committee." Amina blinked. "Me? Yes. Several teachers and students think you're exactly what that space needs." It wasn't what she had expected. For weeks, she had fought to simply be left alone. But now she was being asked to lead, and something inside her shifted. She thought of her father, who once told her that leadership didn't always come with permission. It came with responsibility. She thought of her mother, standing in that hearing, reminding the world what quiet strength looked like. And she thought of the other kids in the school, watching her, wondering if someone like them could ever be heard. "I'll do it," she said, her voice clear, and she did. The first meeting was small, just a few students from different grades, some curious others, cautious. But Amina came prepared, not with a long speech or a list of complaints, but with a question. "What do you want to change here?" One student, a shy sophomore named Eli, raised his hand. "Sometimes I feel like there's only one kind of student that fits in. Everyone else just tries to survive." Another, Maria, added, "We never talk about what it's like being different here, like we just pretend everything's fine." Amina didn't nod out of politeness. She listened, deeply, and then she said something that would set the tone for everything to come. "Then let's stop pretending." Over the next few weeks, the committee became more than a token gesture. It became a movement. Amina led with quiet confidence. She didn't dominate the room. She created space for others to rise. They planned workshops, invited speakers, and worked with teachers to include more diverse voices in the curriculum. But most of all, they started conversations, real ones, uncomfortable ones, honest ones. Students who had once felt invisible now had a place to speak. And more importantly, to be heard. Even Haley, though she never joined the committee, felt the weight of change pressing in. Her power, once absolute, was now diminished by something she couldn't control: truth. Amina never rubbed it in. She never gloated. Her victory wasn't in Haley's fall. It was in the rise of something better. One morning, after a school-wide assembly where Amina had introduced a guest speaker on racial bias and empathy, a teacher pulled her aside. "You have a gift," she said, "not just for standing up, but for bringing people with you when you rise." Amina smiled, humbled, but steady. That night she wrote in her journal again, for the first time in weeks. "They tried to define me by my silence. Now they're listening to it. I used to think strength was just surviving, but maybe real strength is choosing to lead when no one asked you to." The tide had turned, and Amina was no longer just the quiet new girl. She was a leader, one they never saw coming. The final Friday of the semester brought a hush to the air at Savannah High, the kind of silence that carries not dread, but reflection. The halls that once buzzed with hierarchy and hidden cruelty now pulsed with something new. Not perfection, not utopia, but change. And at the center of it all was a girl who had once walked those same corridors unseen. Amina Clark stood in front of the mirror in the school restroom, adjusting the collar of her deep blue blazer. It wasn't for a presentation or a speech, or another meeting of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. There was no need to prove anything anymore. Today she wore it for herself, because she could, because she wanted to. Her reflection looked back with steady eyes, calm, resilient, proud. Later that morning, the school hosted its annual Student Recognition Assembly. It was always a carefully orchestrated event. Athletes applauded, honor roll students named a few club leaders called to the stage. But this year's closing speech was different. Principal Albright, once a distant figure in Amina's story, had requested her to speak. Not because of a title she held, but because of what she had come to represent. As she stepped onto the auditorium stage, a hush fell. The kind that once accompanied judgment now carried respect. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't need to. The entire room leaned in to hear her. I came to this school not knowing who I'd have to be, she began, voice quiet but unwavering. I thought if I stayed invisible, I could avoid trouble. But the truth is, silence doesn't protect you. It just delays the moment when you have to choose who you are. She paused, letting the words settle. I didn't want to fight, but I did. Not with fists, with truth, with patience, with choices. And I learned that strength isn't how hard you hit. It's how steady you stand, even when everything tries to shake you. She looked out at the sea of faces, some wide-eyed, some smiling, some tearful. I used to think power looked like control. Now I know it looks like responsibility. It looks like listening. It looks like speaking up for someone when no one else will. And most of all, it looks like being exactly who you are, even when it's hard. The applause came slowly, then like thunder. It wasn't just for her words. It was for the journey, for the battles fought behind silence, for the courage she had taught them without ever demanding attention. After the assembly, students came up to her, some she had never spoken to before. A freshman boy thanked her for inspiring him to try out for the school debate team. A junior girl with tightly coiled hair whispered that because of Amina, she had reported a teacher who kept making microaggressive comments. A teacher confessed she had quietly begun reevaluating her curriculum to include more voices from students of color. It wasn't just what Amina had done, it was what she had made possible for others. Outside in the courtyard, under the old magnolia tree, Haley Prescott approached. She wasn't flanked by her usual entourage. Her eyes were unsure, no longer filled with smug certainty. I didn't come to fight, Haley said, voice lower than usual. Amina said nothing, only nodded. I was wrong, Haley continued. About you. About a lot of things. There was no script for this moment. No audience, just two girls standing in the aftermath of everything they had become to each other. I don't expect forgiveness, Haley said, but I wanted to say it anyway. Amina studied her for a moment. It's not about forgiving, she said. It's about what you do next. Haley nodded once, then turned and walked away. Not defeated, but changed. And maybe that was enough. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and the light scattered golden across the school grounds, Amina sat beneath the magnolia, watching as students passed by, laughing, talking, existing without fear. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't feared. She was known. And more importantly, she had become something even greater than strong. She had become safe. For others. For herself. Not because she demanded power, but because she redefined it. That was the new legacy she carried. A legacy of quiet storms and fearless calm. A new kind of power. The kind that didn't scream. The kind that simply endured and changed everything in its wake. In the heart of Savannah, Georgia, a quiet storm arrived in the form of a girl named Amina Clark, a 17-year-old black girl with discipline carved into her bones and silence that spoke louder than most ever could. She didn't come looking for attention. She didn't crave conflict or seek to disrupt the social fabric of her new school. She only wanted what every young person deserves: the right to exist, to learn to belong. But in a school where appearances dictated respect and privilege masked cruelty, Emina's quiet presence was misread as weakness. The bullies, led by the popular Haley Prescott and her boyfriend Troy, mistook her reserve for submission. They prodded, they mocked, they tried to force her into a stereotype they could control. What they didn't know was that Amina carried a different kind of strength, one that had been trained, sharpened, and tempered over years of martial arts. She didn't use it to intimidate. She used it to center herself in a world that too often dismissed her existence. When Troy tried to physically provoke her, the world shifted. With a single measured movement, Amina defended herself. She didn't hurt him. She simply refused to be victimized. That moment, captured in a 10-second video clip, spread like wildfire. Not because it was violent, but because it was powerful. Because it showed control. Because it revealed how dignity can remain intact, even in the face of hate. From that moment, Amina's story stopped being one of survival and became one of leadership. She faced a suspension. She endured administrative scrutiny, but she stood firm, flanked by her military mother, and refused to apologize for choosing self-respect over silence. And when the school offered her a position to lead the newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Committee, she accepted, not to fix the school, but to elevate those who had never felt heard. Amina led not with a loud voice, but with deep listening. She invited others to share their truths. She transformed fear into dialogue. Her strength became contagious. The students began to see their school not as a battlefield, but as a place that could finally reflect the complexity of who they were. Even Haley, the girl who once reigned through exclusion, saw her influence dissolve in the light of truth. And when she approached Amina with an apology, not expecting forgiveness, but offering reflection, it marked a quiet, profound shift. Amina did not gloat. She did not seek revenge. She simply asked, "What will you do next?" That's the power she carried, not to destroy her enemies, but to disarm them with grace. By the end of the school year, Amina was no longer the new girl. She was a symbol of discipline, of compassion, of rising above. She had redefined what it means to be strong. Not loud, not feared, not controlling, but steady, present, unshakable. The lesson from Amina Clark's journey is both simple and profound. True power isn't about dominating others. It's about being rooted in who you are, even when the world demands you to shrink. Her story teaches us that silence is not always weakness, that stillness can hold storms, that when you choose to stand your ground with integrity, you not only protect yourself, you create space for others to rise too. In today's world, many of us face invisible battles: discrimination in the workplace, isolation in our communities, assumptions based on skin, gender, income, or beliefs. Amina's story reminds us that we don't have to meet ignorance with anger. We can meet it with preparation, with calm, and with values that don't crumble under pressure. Whether you're walking into a boardroom, a classroom, or a conversation where you're underestimated, let Amina's story remind you you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to strike to be strong. The most lasting kind of change often begins in the quiet moments when you choose to rise anyway. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own quiet strength, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating powerful stories that matter. And who knows, the next one might just be yours.